steady. 'Tis all we have left to prize. Quaff a cup to the dead already, and one to the next who dies.
Over a month of warfare had now been waged, and the farmer army, the Boer army, had advanced southward through the British Natal, had surrounded and isolated the principal British army base at Ladysmith with its 12,000 soldiers, had crossed the main barrier, the Tugela River, and had penetrated even further southward, and were now seriously threatening to drive the British Imperial Army into the sea at Durban. After a long and agonizing ponder, General Buller, down here at Frere with his relieving army, decided to attack the Boers over to the west. His force was now about doubled. The vast column of war began to move on January the 10th, 1900. 2 days later, Buller was on top of this place called Mount Alice, and he peered northward through a telescope at the Tugela River and beyond to the range of mountains culminating in one which is called Spienkop. By January the 20th, the British had crossed the river and were assaulting the mountain range. Again, it was a bloody collision. And I think that at this point, we should remind ourselves that the gold which was under Johannesburg was still a long distance away. And I think that we should still remind ourselves of the awful businessmen and politicians who had demanded that gold and that power. Cecil Rhodes, Milner, and Chamberlain. Then Buller agreed that the poor, bloody soldiers should attack the central mountain. The British advance troops, led by Colonel Thornycroft, climbed the steep southern face of Spienkop. They reached the apparent summit at 4 a.m. on January the 24th, 1900. At 7:30 a.m., the dawn mist evaporated, and a shocked Thornycroft observed that his men were not at the dominant crest. Indeed, a formidable array of Boer Mauser rifles were pointing down at them. And Mr. Michael Davitt, an Irishman fighting for the Boers, stated, "So close were the opposing forces that some of the Boers sprang at the nearest British troops and wrested their rifles from them. And the British soldiers were also overlooked and shot at from their right. The Boers occupied a peak called the Knoll. The battlefield of Spienkop is about the size of a decent English field. The British General Woodgate signalled to Buller, who was over at Mount Alice. "I'm exposed to terrible crossfire. Can barely hold our own. Water badly needed. Help us." And then General Woodgate, like so many of his poor men, was shot through the head and was killed. Another British officer, Earl de la Warr, asked the terrible question: "Why are we here? Why have we come up this murderous mountain to be shot down?" British reinforcements did come up to this Spienkop. And amongst them was an old friend of mine, now of course long dead, Private Packer of the 1st Middlesex Regiment.
It was a very high mountain, you know. It must have took us nearly an hour to get up there. And some places were sheer rock. We had to bunk one another up. And it must have been about an hour before we came under fire.
Was it very bad where you were?
Yeah, it was there. It was that Boer's pom-pom gun that was doing all the damage. One officer, he wanted us to charge, see? And I know we all got up to charge, and he, of course, he went down. He only just stood up and went down there, but 5 or 6 bullets in him. Of course, that stopped the charge.
Of course, a lot of British casualties on Spion Kop were through the head, weren't they?
Oh, yes. Well, it was chaps putting their head over the top, see? I would have done the same, see, only this Natal fella, he told me what to do. He told me, don't put your head over the top. He said, I know these buggers, he said, fire round the rock, he said. Not over the top, he said.
The British soldiers began to withdraw from the awful anarchy. They suffered well over 1,000 casualties in this small area. The Boers about 300. Mr. Packer.
We went up there and was fighting all day, and well, until it got dark, and somebody says we got to retire. Eh? And there's blokes laying there wounded, and couldn't get a stretcher bearer. I was offering any money to get a stretcher bearer. Couldn't get one.
My friend Mr. Packer had witnessed such carnage that I asked him if he had lost many personal friends.
Well, there were 6 of us chummed up on the boat going out, and 5 of them was killed. There was 3 shot in the head and spine cop, and there was 1 got killed at Land's Neck, and another little fella got killed at Fort Itoll.
I hope the gold under Johannesburg was worth the effort. General Sir Redvers Buller now decided to try once more, just to the east of Spion Kop, at a mountain called Valkrans. But first, pontoons would have to be constructed across the Tugela River so that the British soldiers could cross. The Royal Engineers constructed them under Boer fire. A Boer friend of mine, Mr. Prinsloo, who was 17 years old at the time, told me what he saw.
Of that battle, now then, we must go slowly, so that I don't cry. I don't want to cry. That was a very sad business, a cruel affair. As they ran towards us, our people called, "There they come, there they come." As soon as the bugle sounded, the English sprang up and ran towards Spion Kop. They kept coming on, and you could see them fall. And then, hearing the bugle again, they would jump up and keep on running towards Spion Kop. As soon as they fell to the ground, then you could hear. Then they jumped up, again at the breach. There goes another one. There goes another one. You could see a helmet flying through the air, but still they kept on coming.
By February the 17th, 1900, Mr. Prinsloo and Mr. Botma and their comrades once again drove Buller's army into total retreat, right back to their original base at Chivli. Far